Good morning. One of the great things about this conference is not that we just learn new techniques, is we get to share stories. And what we'd like to do this morning is share Missguided's story and their journey over the last year from a performance point of view. I'm Andy, obviously, flowery shirt, and this is my customer, really, Mark.
Yeah, no flowery shirt, but the beard. So hands up who's heard of Missguided before? Okay, that's not too bad. So the reason I ask is, due to the event code of conduct, there's not a lot I can show you from the Missguided website. Because reading through the kind of things that weren't allowed, it's kind of like reading a checklist of what we want in our marketing campaigns. Profanity, sexualized images. So this is about the safest one we could find to give you an overview of Missguided. So we were founded in 2009. We're headquartered in Manchester. We are an international brand and retailer of fast fashion clothing to young women. So we appeal to young, trend-engaged women. Our target market is around 16 to 29. So just before that cognitive decline really starts to kick in. And our purpose really is to empower young women to look and feel confident. And you'll know what I mean if you do have a look at the website, what that confidence can sometimes lead to. Now, these young women that we're appealing to, they have some very unique traits. And all the tweets I'm about to show you are genuine customer interactions through Twitter. So just to show you kind of how unique our customers are, they are patient. Who knew "fuck the fuck off" was an actual phrase? They show great levels of patience. They are rational. We once got told that we'd ruined somebody's life because we didn't deliver a next day order. They are calm. What's nice, though, is that we're not being blamed there for the slow website. They're blaming God. Could be another metric. And they are reasonable. Now, actually, there's an interesting thing we'll talk to you about as to why that's not necessarily true. When we do run these huge discounts, it doesn't necessarily mean the site actually runs slower. But, so as you can see there, so our customer is incredibly demanding. And so we knew that we had a unique challenge. We knew that performance was really important to our customer, just because of the pure feedback we were getting. We also saw the metrics that indicated all of the same things you've looked at in some of the previous presentations. There was these correlations between poor user engagement and page load times. So we knew it was important, but we didn't know how important and what size the opportunity was. So we needed some help. And so we reached out to Andy and the team at what was NCC at the time, now Eggplant. And we sat around in a meeting room to talk about how we saw this opportunity, but how could we put some numbers on this? How could we gauge the size of the prize? We knew that the impact needed to make a difference. So we're a commercial business. We classify engagement by overall conversion rate and revenues for the company. So the first thing we did was we looked at using the RUM tools to start to give us the aggregated view as to what was happening on site with load times and how those started to correlate with some of our other metrics. But we also needed help to interpret that information. And so when we spoke to the guys, we said we need to start to figure out a way of proving how improvements in load time will lead to some commercial metrics. A few days later, I received an email from Simon, who was working for NCC at the time. And it was just kind of a very simple email. "Morning, Mark. Attached is a small report that I've been asked to pull together for you. I think we can make you £1.2 million. I think words to that effect, Simon. And it was like, okay, this sounds interesting. Let's have a look at this. And we started to look at this correlation between page load time and conversion rate. The nice thing from a commercial perspective and for the rest of my business is I could go back and not only talk to them about all these cool things we wanted to do to reduce page load time, but we could start to say, look, there's some money at the end of this. There's some commercial benefit to us putting some effort and investment into making this experience better. And that's how the relationship started.
And what Simon did is in his original report, he got web page test out on a Motorola G2, so on a poor network connection, memory and CPU constrained devices that Tim was talking about yesterday, and did the standard competitive horror story. And you can see that Missguided was the top one, and it's a bit on the slow side compared to its competitors. So that's where we started visually. What we also did is we had real user monitoring on the site, and we looked at engagement from a point of view. Now, I'm using page load time, despite Tammy's warnings, because I had to go and pull this out of a report that was written last year, and it was the only chart I had, and I need some charts to tell some stories. So we have the average pages per session, up the y-axis, page load time across the bottom. And you can see that the Android median load time is 14.2 seconds. So people are waiting that long. And iOS is much faster, but we can see that in general, as we see, Android is slower, so the curve lags. And we started looking at what practices Missguided had in place. And they had lots of good practices in place. Using HTTPS, H2, had a CDN, image management services, so decent quality and size image were being released or delivered. They were bundling assets, and they were using responsive images. So there were a lot of things in place. So Simon then did some early fixes, some easy work to identify, or some early work to identify easy things to do. The classic one to start with is preloading fonts. Who's aware? Who uses preloading for fonts these days? Who doesn't? All right. So the reason you should use preloading for fonts is fonts get discovered late. The browser has to download the HTML, download the CSS, start building the DOM, start building the CSS object model before it discovers what fonts you need. If you already know, you can tell the browser, go ahead, download them. I'm going to use them. Font display property also helps these days. So what we get is a waterfall where fonts are all of a sudden bumped up right to the top. So progressive enhancement. So if it breaks or a browser doesn't support it, doesn't matter. Those people who support it, and in this case it was Android, got an improved experience. It's not on iOS yet. It's in a sort of beta flag you can turn on. The other thing we noticed looking at waterfalls in web page test is this is when the page is starting to render in this film strip, or in this waterfall, so the green line. But all the main content is being downloaded. All the images for the homepage are there. So what was going on? And when we scrolled down, we saw very clearly that Optimizely was sending a bunch of beacons back and causing a blocking start render. And Optimizely will be a bit of a theme through this talk, as you'll come across. So Optimizely is being chatty and causing problems. So Missguided went ahead and fixed those. And what we see is that things are starting to get faster. Android's got about 2.5 seconds faster. iOS has got about half a second faster for some other fixes going on. So we're starting to make improvements. But this is tiny improvements. And what we needed to do is prove there was a real case for performance and a real link between performance and revenue. And that's where we got to last summer. One of the things that people love, or when we shop online, we get to see pictures of the product. We don't get to feel it. We don't get to touch it. We don't understand how well that dress fits us, or how comfortable those shoes are. So people rely on reviews quite a lot for other people's opinions of what that product is like. And some of them can be great reviews, and some of them can be scathing. And lots of reviews are done via third-party services, like FIFA or Trustpilot. But different review services have different performance impacts. And in this case, sorry, Rebecca, wherever you are, because I know you would be partly behind this, is they were using Bizarre Voice. And what we found is Bizarre Voice was taking over a second just to execute its JavaScript, even before it had been downloaded. So on Android devices, it was really, really slow. So Mark's quite a brave customer. He said, all right, take Bizarre Voice off for Android. Let's see what happens. And can you guess where they removed it? It had a massive, massive impact on, this is median page load times here, and particularly on product pages. It had a massive impact. And then what we did is we looked at what that effect had on revenue. And this is week 0. This is the week before Bizarre Voice was removed for Android. And you'll see I've got a percentage up the side rather than actual numbers for commercial reasons. But what I've done is I've made week 0 at 30 seconds, because yes, some people wait 25 seconds on average for the page load times through their session and still convert. So there are some very patient people out there. So week 0, we consider it to be 100% of revenue. And then what we're going to do is compare it over the next 8 weeks, 9 weeks after this. So we took it off. Look, we've got faster, and our revenue's gone up. Week 2, made even more gains. Week 3, ooh. Turns out this was the week before payday, which affects people's buying patterns. Then beyond, well, we're on week 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, week 9. So week on week, for where we tracked it, removing Bizarre Voice increased revenue. We were satisfied at this point. We kept that. And Android revenue over that 9-week period went up between the first week and the last week, increased by 56% per week overall. So a massive, massive gain.
So unfortunately, all of these benefits, just as stated in the previous presentation, it's very difficult to maintain those when the website doesn't remain static. So Missguided is a great example. As a business and as an organization internally, I can tell you this is true as well. Like, it doesn't stay the same for long. Nothing stays the same. So we have promotions on site daily. Some of those promotions are only on for an hour and then they're gone. So a huge amount of content and dynamic content is changing frequently. We do huge launches and collaborations that will drive massive spikes in traffic. Cyber Weekend is good examples. When emails and push notifications go out, within 2 to 3 minutes we can have a 10 times increase in traffic. We, on our first Cyber Weekend after migrating to AWS, we got a call from them. They were worried that we were under a DDoS attack. We'd actually just DDoSed ourselves. So we get these huge peaks and troughs in traffic. And a really interesting thing as well, due to the quality of infrastructure that we have and the way the site is cached over several layers, we actually run fastest when we're busy. So during those real peak hours, so last weekend was a good example, we ran a sale. I mean, the sale was so good, we were being told online that we'd made a mistake pricing things. And during that time, because of the levels of traffic that we had, because caches were hot, the site ran really, really fast. You know, a 1 second average reduction based on the previous week's average. So, you know, challenging times, and we knew what we'd done wouldn't stay static for long, so we had to find a way to keep going.
Yeah, and some of the other things that happened during this period is there was a Barbie X launch, there was a bank holiday weekend, and all sorts of stuff going on. So was that 56% gain real? We came to the conclusion that yes, we got a permanent 4-second median improvement for Android users. But what did that mean in terms of real gains in revenue? And we came to the conclusion, we went back and we baselined what happened with Android against the other traffic sources. We were lucky in that there was a split going on here, so we just changed Android, whereas Mac OS, iOS, Windows were all unaffected by this change. And we used that as a baseline, and we came to the conclusion that actually saving those 4 seconds for Android users drove an increase of 26% in revenue. So it was great. And we see here that, look how this Android median is moving this way. The median is now down to 8.6. When we consider we started at 14, it's a massive improvement. Engagement on Android is rising quite heavily. So it's let's go and have a party.
Yeah. So had we done it, had we won, we'd made some significant gains, no doubt about it. We managed to make a huge difference. Can I tell you the revenue numbers? No. Was it somewhere near what Simon was predicting? It wasn't far off, but the beauty of it was we were actually able to prove it as well. So as Andy says, the way we were benchmarking changes versus other site experiences that had remained the same allowed us to show that potential impact. And because of the work that we'd done with the guys and the data we were getting from Ron, we were able to start proving correlations between conversion rate and some of our engagement metrics around page depth. So for us, a great site experience is staying on site, viewing more pages. We know there's a direct correlation between that and conversion rate, and we knew that by reducing page load time, we were encouraging higher levels of engagement. So this was great. Unfortunately, like anything, when you're presenting to the commercial teams at a business or a board, first of all, they're pessimistic, then they get excited, and then they say, great, well, now can you do more? So we needed a new challenge. And over a few beers, just before Christmas, was it?
It was Halloween, wasn't it? We were in a pub up by the BBC.
That's right, we were, yeah. So over a few beers, I came down to London to meet with Andy and the team to set the new challenge. And this was it.
So the first thing we did is assemble a team. And we had a team of quite a small team, 3-4 people, product owners, developers in Romania, developers and testers in Manchester, put a team together and set up a series of performance sprints to help improve. I got them to focus, and I was there as the external advisor. Try to get them to focus on reducing time to render. Because if you speed this up, then generally this gets faster as well. It's not always true, so you have to be careful. And we focused on making the site quicker to render and quicker for people to be able to interact with. And there are different approaches across different pages, because we have home pages, category pages, and product pages. And generally, as you get down that hierarchy on a retail site, they tend to get slower. There's no magic go faster button. It's hard work sometimes. So, we had to dig into the code and get really down to what was going on. What were the challenges? And about 6 weeks ago, I was at a conference in the States, and Katie Seiler-Miller of Etsy was talking, and she did a talk called Raiders of the Fast Start, Front-End Performance Archeology. And literally, doing this stuff can be like archaeology. You've got a site that's been built over time. It's based on an outdated version of Magento that can't be replaced. So there are dependencies that come with that. You have to discover, this stuff I want to get rid of. What happens? Does it break stuff if we take it away? So we dug down. One of the really useful things when looking at the bundle, looking at the JavaScript and CSS bundles, is to visualize it using Source Map Explorer, because source maps are enabled. And we can start to ask questions about how much of jQuery UI is used, or do we still need fast click now all the browser behaviors have changed? And just simple things like this, and showing them to people and getting them to answer these questions allowed us to quite dramatically reduce the core script bundle size, which it was render blocking, so it improves the experience. Lately, they've moved on to using Webpack as a way of deferring more of that script as well. The performance work was mostly dull, boring stuff that anybody can do. It is going through those dependencies, working out what code's needed, Removing duplicate styles. There was a bug in the build process where the same 6,000 lines of CSS styles ended up at multiple places in a style sheet. Ditching social media libraries and just using ordinary links. Moving some third parties onto misguided domains. Using resource hints to pre-connect to third parties. And removing CSS prefixes. All that sort of stuff that's boring, that we as developers probably don't like doing, but made a difference. We also cleaned up Optimizely. Optimizely was using their own version, so we had 2 versions of Optimizely on the page, or when Bizarre Voice was loaded, 3. So we made Optimizely use the standard version that was on the site. And this is Optimizely's recommended practice anyway. There were some AA tests to fix bugs, because you deploy something, you get a bug, fix it using Optimizely because it was quicker, and then put a ticket in the backlog to fix it properly, apart from the ticket in the backlog never got to.
I can see a lot of smiles. Don't tell me you don't do that.
We stripped out duplicate plugins, experiments for other environments like pre-production, got rid of expired ones. Mark hired somebody to help manage Optimizely in the testing, and it became their responsibility to manage it much better than they were. There were some speed bumps along the way. Picture image is quite heavily used across the site. Unfortunately, so picture image, for those who don't know, you can specify type. So you can specify WebP for Opera and Chrome, JPEG 2000 for Safari, and anything else. We'll use this. Unfortunately, we noticed some weird behavior. iOS Safari on a phone. And look, we're downloading WebP images. We're actually downloading, I think it's 600K of WebP images before we get to the product JPEGs. And this had come up in a Slack conversation that some of us are involved in the Web Performance Slack group. You should join that if you're interested. And what it turns out that Colin Bendel got to the bottom of, there was actually a bug in Safari's preloader where it was ignoring the type attribute and just downloading the WebP images anyway. So we had to stop serving WebP, which made Android go backwards slightly. But overall, these things happen. While we were switching out jQuery from Optimizely, we had to duplicate a bunch of Optimizely snippets and extensions, sorry. And we suddenly realized partway through as we were doing this that the Optimizely bundle was getting much, much bigger. So we sort of had this emergency, all right, need to do something about this. And in the process, we actually broke the Australian site. But there aren't many customers in Australia, are there? So
they're all asleep.
It wasn't too bad. It was fixed pretty quickly. So there were speed bumps along the way. So the question is, where did we get to? Where did we end up in this journey? This is where we started, with Android at 14.2, iOS at 6.2. By June, we'd shaved a couple seconds off. By August, removing Bizarre Voice, we got even quicker. And then this was last April. So the really fascinating thing about this graph is, I'll put the medians up. So iOS is now, in this chart, the median is 4.1. Android is at 5.3, roughly. The Android curve is really, really interesting. So there are several things. Apart from the work that was done, obviously, hardware upgrades are going on in this process. People buy new iPhones. Google release Pixel 2s. Samsung release high-end phones, and Samsung release low-end phones. So this Android curve is really interesting, because about here is Pixel phones and high-end Samsungs. Then we get this second distribution where the other bump is where, I can't remember what's in that, but some older Samsungs, I think. These are the low-end Samsungs over here, and then there's some crappy phones down here. But, so it's easy to consider iOS as an homogeneous whole from a smartphone point of view, because all iOS phones are pretty fast. Android is a different picture, because there's great stuff out there, and there's rubbish stuff out there. But, one is a iOS phone is a 600 quid phone, and an Android phone is everything from 50 quid to 600 quid. It's about choice. But, don't people with cheap phones deserve a great experience, as Tim talked about yesterday? So, we made this huge, huge improvement. And we learned some things along the way. One of the challenges we learned is that attribution is still hard. Attribution is hard from a marketing point of view anyway. It's like you talk to any marketeer and they're trying to work out, is it my email campaign that's driving profits? Is it my paid adverts? Is it referral links? Plus, we've got all the stuff to do with pricing, promotions, new brands, trends, the weather. And we've had some success in linking performance and conversion through two means, but it's still quite hard. Optimizely needs careful management. Optimizely is the most effective foot gun you can put on a site ever. Because what it does is it allows people to build experiments, to put JavaScript in. And we had an example this morning where you've got an email or a text message that
we've doubled the size of the homepage by inserting a GIF through Optimizely. And that's just it's just a lack of understanding of the impact of these things. But Optimizely is a great democratizer of content. Unfortunately, Optimizely is a great democratizer of content. So there's not only technical work to be done here, but also business process to ensure that we don't lose the gains that have been made by all this archaeology aren't undone by one person inserting a GIF.
Yeah, so although Optimizely is a foot gun, they care deeply about performance. They have a performance team that help their clients. They capture lots of performance data. So if you're an Optimizely customer, you should go talk to them. They capture how long their snippet blocked your page, for example, how big the downloads were. They capture lots of good resource timing information that they're willing to share with you. The biggest thing we learned is perseverance pays. Small fixes done continuously get you to a point where you improve performance for everybody. So we've got here. Where do we go now? So there are some things. It's like, it's no good just measuring what happens in performance in live. That's too late, particularly if you've got a 2-week deploy cycle. If you can deploy hourly, or do a fix, deploy it, probably doesn't matter. You can do things quickly. But where we've got a longer cycle where we're trying to pull out dependencies, you need to pull performance monitoring back into the build process. And so Missguided are probably going to go with Dare Boost for that. There's other Optimizely improvements going on. Essentially, we're going to shift from doing all the A/B testing in Optimizely to using a React front end to run the experiments and just use Optimizely for feature flags. So I suppose the ultimate question is, did we make it to 3 seconds? Did we meet our goal? And we got to 3.5. The campaign that Mark talked about on the bank holiday weekend, last weekend, for most of Saturday, where the site was running really hot, the median page load time was 3.5 seconds. It's quite funny. Once the campaign stopped, the site slows down again because the caches aren't as well populated. It's when anybody ever talks to you about load testing and how sites are supposed to get slower under load, this is a really, really sort of different phenomena, and it was quite surprising, I think, when we first discovered it.
Plus, our finance director always rounds down, so I'm classing that as 3.
Yeah. So we hope you've enjoyed the story. We hope there are things you can take away from it. We were really pleased when we looked back at how far Missguided have moved over the last year. And I think we were really pleased that we actually managed to make a good link between performance and the things that matter to site owners. I'll upload the slides later on so you can pursue them at your leisure. But thank you.